We talked about this with Alex Thompson a couple of shows ago. Alex Thompson reported out recently over at Axios that people's disenchantment over the just years of lying about the state of Joe Biden's health, Alex theorized, led right in to Andrew Cuomo's loss to Zohran Mamdani in the New York City mayoral primary, the Democratic primary, because people are so deeply disenchanted with the Democratic establishment that Andrew Cuomo represented. And again, we have a little bit more on that too. Before we do, though, I want to put this memo. This is actually from the same new book that we just referenced with Megyn and the Kamala Harris segment. We were talking about them pleading with Taylor Swift to go do a campaign appearance with, but from the same book, this is a debate memo. This is F11, and this is really funny because they, for some reason, capitalize. This is from, if you're watching this, you see the memo. It's almost written like a cartoonish version of a memo, but it says from senior advisors. Subject, follow-up on debates. It's from April of 2024, so just a couple of months before the debate disaster that we've now just passed the 1-year anniversary of, and they're capitalizing all of the yours. So in a memo attempting to persuade Joe Biden to do this debate, they are so clearly trying to communicate with a mentally diminished man that they have to capitalize every your and you to make it legible to him. And, you know, this is, I'm reading from Politico Playbook now. They say, basically, by holding the first debate in the spring, you, according to the memo, will be able to reach the widest audience possible. It's like Wheel of Fortune, right? Like that's how you have to write it for a mentally diminished elderly man. Before we are deep in the summer months with the conventions, Olympics, and family vacations taking precedence, in addition, the earlier you are able to debate, the better, so that the American people can see you standing next to Trump and showing the strength of your leadership compared to Trump's weakness and chaos. You get a free all-expenses trip paid to Hawaii, courtesy of Wheel of Fortune. That's literally how they're writing this here. But let me share actually this segment from Playbook that I thought was rather interesting. They added a little bit of commentary to the report, and this one particular bit just cracked me up. Here it is. It says, final thought bubble. There's been an awful lot written about a quote-unquote cover-up inside Biden's White House over the president's mental acuity. And as lots of excellent scoopy reporting has shown, Biden's closest aides were far from open about the extent of his decline. But it does also seem an odd kind of cover-up to recommend the president get out on national TV as soon as possible for a 90-minute debate with his opponent in front of millions of viewers. One to ponder as further details emerge. Does it seem like an odd kind of cover-up to try to get him to do the thing that every presidential candidate has done for the last several decades, since 1960, a televised presidential debate? Does it seem odd that they might be trying to move it up to the point where it can blend into the background of everyone's political memory by November? Does that seem like an odd kind of cover-up that they are trying to find the best possible freaking way to get this man to do a televised debate that doesn't make as bad of an impact on the election as they expect it to? I mean, it's just brain dead analysis to look at this and say, totally undercuts. I mean, man, totally undercuts the narrative that this is some type of cover-up. What a weird cover-up. I mean, I know there's all of this. There's volumes of reporting at this point about people who were concerned in private and, not expressing it publicly and keeping it to themselves. But hey, it can't really be a cover-up if you're trying to get that man on TV for 90 minutes. He's just the president of the United States. I mean, just the reason nobody in the country, barely anybody in the media, has such a dumb reaction as this is. But it is a good example of how sometimes the reflexive Beltway press commentary, which is mostly from people who consider themselves reporters, can just be mind-numbingly stupid. This was a great moment in mind-numbing Beltway newsletter stupidity. But I will say, then Playbook went on to note something interesting. They said that Michigan pollster Jill Normington writes in a memo that Playbook got their hands on that both Mallory McMorrow, this is the Democratic Senate primary up in Michigan, and McMorrow's opponent Stevens are, quote, strong general election candidates, but that Stevens has a unique vulnerability in the general election. Her congressional voting record supporting Biden, which was, quote, the most damaging argument against any candidate in the poll. To be clear, this is about specifically narrowly her congressional voting record supporting Biden. It's not about the question of Biden's health. But I think if you're taking that poll and you're asked about support for Joe Biden or being sort of in lockstep with Joe Biden, it's all packaged into the same thing. Just to mention once again what Alex Thompson reported about how that may have affected the New York City Democrat mayoral primary. There are a couple of things that lurk beneath the surface of our politics in ways that people here in DC don't fully detect. I think for the Democratic base, particularly Democratic voters, what they were told over and over again about Joe Biden coming off, I mean, really bookending a decade of what the DNC did to Bernie Sanders, twice, by the way. And you could even add Marianne Williamson to that come 2020. You could probably add Tulsi Gabbard to that come 2020. This is, I mean, the people who don't even support Bernie Sanders and Marianne Williamson and Tulsi Gabbard look back on that, or Andrew Yang, and think, this is not Democratic. This is the Democratic Party. And so the Democratic primary base, I think, was genuinely pushed to the brink. And you were starting to see almost Tea Party-like moments. Actually, I didn't plan to mention this, but I am going to pull it up because I found it very amusing. I think the cool thing to do would be for me to share my own tweet. I feel like that is the humble that just, I think, really does show my sort of total humility in all circumstances. But this is Jennifer Welch of the I've Had It podcast freaking out at Hakeem Jeffries, unofficial mascot of After Party, actually, for not defending Mom Donnie on questions of anti-Semitism. And she said, this was your moment, Hakeem, this kind of cherry picking because of who donates to Hakeem Jeffries. AIPAC donates to Hakeem Jeffries. This is a pretty popular left-leaning podcast host with a Bravo background, by the way. But the reason that I shared my own tweet, despite, well, actually, it wasn't just because I wanted to sort of put my own pithiness on display. It was because it reminded me, and I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek here, though, of watching like Rick Santelli start the Tea Party live on television because he was so fed up with the way the country was being run. And you saw that with Republicans over the last decade. Elon Musk is starting his America Party. One thing that's interesting about that is Donald Trump has basically created a third party within the Republican Party. He sort of turned the Republican Party into his, like, in the image of Donald Trump, his third party. And the America Party, as Elon Musk has outlined its platform, being very concerned about debt and deficits, all of this, like, about spending, those things. It sounds like what Republicans were obsessed with before Trump. And I'm not saying any of those things are wrong, but as a priority, it's not like the huge kitchen table priority of most voters. You can disagree with that. It's the truth. You can see it show up in poll after poll. Maybe it will increasingly be a kitchen table issue for more and more voters. It's not right now. But all of that is to say, Trump forced the Republican Party to reckon with discontent in the base. People remember, right, when Rand Paul and Ted Cruz showed up here in town, they were called wacko birds, right, by John McCain. They were dissed by people like Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell. The Republican establishment detested them because they came here to DC and they mixed things up. And so you've seen a little bit of that sort of like with the squad, but they've mostly, if you talk to people on the left, my left-leaning friends, there's a lot of dissatisfaction with how they were very close to Nancy Pelosi, for example, over the course of her tenure. And that is sort of breaking up right now. And this is one of I just think actually the left in this case has their finger more on the pulse of the average electorate than the Democratic Party establishment, which doesn't have a pulse, period. So it wouldn't know how to recognize a pulse if a pulse stumbled into its vicinity. But it's true that the Democratic Party right now is being affected by one of those beneath the surface factors. I think for everyone, COVID is one of those. We don't talk about COVID anymore. Nobody wants to talk about COVID anymore. I know many people do actually continue to want to talk about COVID, but that's the perception of what the public thinks. But even if people aren't wanting to hear about COVID every single day in the news, it still influences institutional trust. It still influences civil society. It still influences the way we treat neighbors and teachers and schools and all of those things. So there are a couple of factors that I feel like have just been thrown out the window.